Rare will always be known for the Nintendo days, especially the Nintendo 64 era. They were responsible for so many of the great games in the console, and their last hurrah for the Nintendo's first 3D console was Conker's Bad Fur Day, a strange and humorous platformer that started life as a kid-friendly platformer in the same vein as Banjo-Kazooie. Well, I don't know what happened during development, but Conker was released as a mature-rated, raunchy, and violent platformer that doesn't remember what it's trying to be. It became a cult classic despite releasing at the end of the Nintendo 64's life cycle. It was also critically acclaimed, so how could this game not be good? Does Rare leave the Nintendo 64 with a good impression, or is this a rare case of them stumbling? Conker the Red Squirrel has just turned 21 years old and he's out drinking with his friends. Drunk and not fully there, he decides to head home to meet up with his girlfriend Barry, but he just so happens to go the wrong way home. He ends up in an area he's not familiar with a bad hangover. He meets a scarecrow named Birdie who teaches him all about context-sensitive actions which help him get over his ailment. Conker then sets out to find his way home and it's all downhill from there. I can't really say any more without spoiling, and that wouldn't be right. The story starts off ridiculous and ends up its own ass, in a good way. The game throws everything you know about video game stories out the window, and it's all the better for it. It's full of British humor, and it's all very vile. Of course, this leads a very nonsensical story that makes no sense and changes tones far too often. Am I supposed to laugh? Be scared? Be sad? Or just be confused about what's going on? Though the game has a great ending. It goes without saying that this game is sensitive to context. The game presents itself as a platformer, which it is, but the game really relies on the context-sensitive actions, which I'll get into in a bit. The basic platforming plays how you'd expect, just that Conker controls a little better than other runner and jumpers. You jump with the A button and his movement is quick and handles well for the most part, then he has the ability to float using his tail, exactly like Dixie Kong does with her hair in Donkey Kong Country. This is used to extend your jump like you'd expect, and, just like in Donkey Kong Country, you begin to rely on it pretty quickly. You use the Z button to crouch, which allows you to crawl and jump high. The C buttons move the camera, and the R button causes Conker to look around the environment. This then just leaves the B button, which is what controls the context-sensitive actions. These actions are special actions that give Conker the tools he needs to progress through the environment, and most are indicated by a big B button pad on the floor. Once on a pad, a giant light bulb will appear above Conker's head, indicating that the action is able to be activated. Some areas don't have the B button pad, but will still clue you in with the light bulb. Other than that, the B button uses the weapon Conker has on hand, which is the frying pan in all but a few instances. The frying pan isn't used a whole lot, but it's there when you need it. Whenever you get hit, you'll lose a piece of life, which is indicated by a chocolate bar, and to recover your health, you eat chocolate pieces. Now that I'm done explaining the action in the game, how well does it all come together? And this is where the game falters. Running and jumping works perfectly fine, but using the context-sensitive actions sort of ruins the feel of the game, as they stick out like a sore thumb and feel artificial. Not to mention that most of the actions are extremely undercooked gameplay elements, such as aiming a slingshot. Using the sensitive N64 joystick isn't the preferred way to aim something like this, which is why the other Rare shooters had aim assist. The game is entirely linear, not giving you much choice in where you go and what you do at any given time, which is a disappointment coming off of their other games such as Donkey Kong 64. Also, the camera is still a nightmare to control as it was in other Nintendo 64 games. It gets caught on objects in the distance and it's impossible to change angles in some situations. There are a few instances where I fell to my death every time I tried to jump to a rope I needed to jump to, all because I couldn't gauge exactly where the rope was in the environment. Other than that, there's a serious problem with the level design. There are a few instances where the areas are designed in such a way that one hit kills you and you only have a few lives. There are also instances of having your life completely shaved away hit after hit, with the game giving you no chance of recovering. Combine how easy it is for you to die with the inability to skip cutscenes and you have a potentially frustrating game. Unfortunately, it's not as fun as it could be and is a perfect example of many different game styles affecting the game and shows that 3D linear platforming games aren't easy to pace. It's a shame, but the controls almost ruin the entire game on top of that. Conker's Bad Fur Day also includes a full-featured multiplayer mode and it's incredibly enjoyable despite not working that well. There are many different modes: Deathmatch, War, Tanks, Beach, Raptor, Race, and Heist. Each are similar but most of them are really enjoyable. Deathmatch is what it is, up to 4 players and some bots as well, face each other in a stage of your choosing. How do you face each other? You don't just hit each other with frying pans, do you? Nope, you use a vast assortment of guns to slaughter each other. When you have a gun out, you press the Z button to shoot straight ahead. Some weapons are auto-aimed and use the R button to aim. If you hit someone in the head, it'll most likely kill them instantly. This is an interesting addition because it completely changes the gameplay. War mode is what it sounds like. The players and bots are split up into teams, the Grey Squirrels and the evil Nazi-like Teddies. War is further broken down to 2 match types, Total War and Colors. Colors is your basic capture the flag, which just tasks players with going to the enemy base, capturing their flag, and taking it back to your base. When holding the flag, you are completely defenseless and the flag is on a ledge at the top of the base, meaning you either have to run back down past your enemies or just fall off and take some damage to avoid them. Whenever the flag is captured, the map is reset and everyone respawns. Total War is basically a deathmatch between the 2 teams with one change. There is a canister in both bases and taking your opponents to a certain area underneath the map will cause the entire map to be gassed, killing everyone who is not wearing a gas mask or in the area the canister was brought to. This game mode is won by killing your enemy and earning points for doing so, just like in Deathmatch. Tanks is just a deathmatch using tanks with a canister that performs the same way as it does in Total War. The tanks aren't very easy to control and it's hard to aim at your enemy. Beach is an interesting mode which separates players into 2 teams again. One team plays as the Teddies that are trying to kill the other team, the Frenchies, from a sniper bunker at the end of the stage. The Frenchies' goals are to either kill the Teddies by hitting the switch in the middle of the map, out in the open by the way, or to make it to the end of the path and escape. It's an enjoyable mode from both sides and it's great to increase your aiming skills as the Teddies since there are only 3 weapons available to you in this mode: the bazooka, the turret gun, and the sniper rifle. All are fun to use and take skill to use well. Raptor is a mode which, again, places the players into 2 different teams. The only difference here is that the other team is something entirely different and plays differently. One team is a group of cavemen trying to collect dinosaur eggs to throw into a giant frying pan in their base, and the other team are a group of dinosaurs trying to stop and eat the cavemen. This is a very unbalanced mode, as entertaining as it is, mainly because the raptors are incredibly tough and can kill in one hit. But on the other side of things, the cavemen can get weapons. Race is a race on hoverboards, and Heist is another interesting one. In Heist, the players are paired off into 4 groups, either all for one or one player and one bot. The game tasks each player with collecting the bag of money in the middle of the map. When a player gets the bag, the other players need to get it from them, unless you're on the same team. Once you get the bag, you need to bring it to the vault that shares the same color as your team. While this sounds fun, it gets really frustrating thanks to the fact that everyone starts off with a baseball bat and a player with their bat out runs faster than the player carrying the money. This hinders the amount of fun you can have while being the player that wants to score points. Other than that, it's entertaining to kill the other players like usual. There are a couple of things that might hinder your enjoyment of the multiplayer. Aside from the standard deathmatch, each mode only has a single stage. This isn't a big deal for the most part, but it really makes things become predictable fast. Of course, the other thing is that the controls still get in the way. The shooting isn't exactly the greatest the game has seen, and to aim your gun, it's best to sit still. This makes things strange since when you find an enemy you want to kill, you come to a complete stop and start shooting. It's not well put together, but it's serviceable if you can get over the controls. As far as the Nintendo 64 goes, Conker's Bad Fur Day is one of the best looking games available. The world is detailed enough for the console and there's a lot going on in most areas. The hub world, Windy, is quite large and is the entrance to every other part of the game. Each area is very distinct looking and there's a lot of visual variety. The character models all look great, even models that only appear once or twice, and they all have the decent animation. The multiplayer looks just as good as the single player, and the violence that goes on there is the most gruesome of the era. Heads explode, bodies fly to pieces, and heads get sliced off. It's insanely violent for a game that looks this kid-friendly, and all this is not to even mention the voice work. The game is completely voiced, and there's a lot of dialogue in the game. The voice work is all very entertaining, and the game is well written. The humor really comes across with how the performances are delivered, and it's impressive to see this much voice work on a Nintendo 64 cartridge, especially a game that doesn't need the expansion pack. The music also reaches Rare's level of quality, and there are quite a few memorable tracks. The biggest advancement in this game is the fact that the game is very cinematic. Instead of rewarding a player through gameplay, the game rewards players with another cutscene, and the cutscenes are very well animated, the faces in particular. Most of the cinematics either contain something funny, vile, or a combination of the two, and it's probably why the game is still remembered today. But this level of detail does come with a price, and that price is performance. Like plenty of Nintendo 64 games, the frame rate drops quite often, and multiplayer rarely runs at a decent clip. Strangely, the game is still playable in this state, but it's terrible to see how poor the performance truly is. Overall, Conker's Bad Fur Day is an unforgettable adventure, and it's no wonder why it's a cult classic today. But the basic issues it contracts from being on the Nintendo 64 are very strong here, stronger than in other Nintendo 64 platformers. The basic controls can be frustrating, the game throws too many ideas in and a lot feel half-baked, the game performs poorly, and the game feels rushed overall. Seeing as it was first announced as a kid-friendly platformer, it probably was rushed. It's a shame too, seeing as it's good looking and has an entertaining story. Even with the issues, it's still fun to play. It's just not the best to play. Conker drinks his sorrows away with 3 stars out of 5 and a silver shell as his glass. The controls, frustrating game design, and cheap deaths are just too much to deal with for a higher score.